Lawyers of Reddit, what was your I am definitely winning this one moment? I had a client who had a pretty severe slip and fall in a pharmacy. In my state, we are not allowed to see surveillance of the subject until after the deposition or other similar testimony is taken. The rule is in place to protect defendants so we don't coach the client based on what we see in the video. Anyway, we take the deposition. Then they send the video. Not 30 minutes later I get a call from opposing counsel wanting to settle. The video revealed that my client had fallen, passed out and peed herself. She was very elderly and very hurt. The manager of the store had an employee put signs out showing wet floor and mop up around the lady, all while she was unconscious, all before calling 911. Settle that one for the policy limits right there. What a pose manager. Hope they got fired. I can't really say I'm proud of this one. It's not a happy case, but it was a pretty sure winner. I represented a client once who had gone through a really rough marriage divorce several years prior. Child drowned, a couple miscarriages, wife developed postpartum on one, which amplified an existing mental illness. Incredibly sad story. At the time I came into the story, the ex-wife had been in jail for several years stalking her ex-husband initially, but was still being held because she wasn't competent to stand trial, and I was representing the ex-husband, who just wanted authorization to take over sale of the house prior to the trial. The wife's pro se briefs made it seem like she was under the impression they were going to relitigate the divorce, filled with allegations related to the marriage itself. Like I said up thread, she already had mental problems, and it was clear she'd picked up some soft-sit tendencies during her ongoing incarceration. When it actually came to trial and she was brought in, you could tell she was clearly not well. She was having a conversation with herself while my client was on the stand giving his explanation of the situation. We didn't really have any witnesses to speak of. This was hardly a major matter, so the ex-wife gave her side after that, and that's when the wheels fell off. She basically went on like she had in her briefs, rambling about the divorce itself, claiming my client had committed adultery and therefore she was entitled to 100% of all assets, aforementioned soft-sit stuff, some general babbling, etc. The judge we had was a nice guy, for which I'm forever grateful. He was patient with her, kind, reminded her that the initial divorce wasn't the issue, but generally just let her continue to speak her piece for a bit. After a few minutes, he gently shut her down, had the bailiff and guards led her away, and gave us the authorization. Like I said, it's not a happy oh lord, we're so going to win this case. Just a sad situation, but it was probably my surest winner other than default judgments. Dang, that's just heartbreaking. I was defending a company being sued for kicking a customer out for being drunk. He showed up to trial. Small claims, wasted at 10 AM. The judges in small claims are lenient on process. They like to adjudicate on the merits. So we started. He's the plaintiff so he goes first. Can barely stand during his opening statement. Knocks over his shopping bag full of evidence. Just awful. The court put a stop to it and ruled in my client's favor. The only words I spoke were putting my name on the record. This is peak small claims court and I love it. Beats my second favorite small claims case where the person suing her sister for stealing her ruby bracelet showed up wearing the bracelet. The shopping bag of evidence was what puts you up to number one. When the judge keeps on questioning the other side repeatedly, without me needing to say or submit anything. Definitely have a lot of those moments, especially when you have a tight case, or when the other side's arguments are too flimsy. Opposing party, mum, stands up while the justice is speaking, interrupts, and says I can't force my children to do something they don't want to do. For context, the justice was talking about how dad, my client, needed to have some parenting time. Mum had alienated the kids and was claiming that they didn't want to see him. Opposing counsel, who had most definitely not anticipated her client doing this, just lowers her head and closes her eyes. I stand up and say if mum can't control her children, then perhaps she should not be the primary parent. The justice replies, and I'll be available to hear it when you make that application, Mr. El Joth the law. That said, I knew I had one when mum stood up earlier and questioned the qualifications of the psychologist she had suggested, when said psychologist came back with a report that my client should have parenting time. I was representing a rental company for homes. Had to present a case where I had to prove that tenants had been using the house they had rented for an illegal weed farm. They claimed they did have weed in the house, but only for their own recreational use. Apparently there's such a thing as a weed expert, and I asked him to testify about how much weed is considered normal for a joint, how many joints per day a regular user would smoke, etc. Little weed facts, so to speak. With his written testimony I did the math, which I presented during my end statement. With all the weed they had lying around, even if the couple smoked 18 heavy joints a day, per person, they had enough for 10 years. That ain't recreational, folks. I knew I had them when I heard the bailiff snort when I presented the numbers. Apparently there's such a thing as a weed expert. I have found my future career. Client was private shuttle bus company which was contracted by the publicly funded regional transit company to pick up elderly and disabled customers, done on a reservation system. Client was sued by a woman alleging that the client didn't pick her up when she called, which was true. She would never make a reservation, instead treated the service like a taxi, and as a result she had to hitchhike into town and stay in a shelter overnight. She claimed that at the shelter someone bit a chunk of her arm off, and sued the client for $25,000, small claims maximum. I brought an application to dismiss before this went to trial on the basis that the woman's claim was bound to fail. Google the doctrine of remoteness, among other things. At the application, the woman wore short sleeves. Her arms appeared unbitten. Signal 1 this was going my client's way. She argued that claim wasn't really about the money or the chunk missing from her arm, but instead she wanted the judge to order that my client pick her up whenever she called. Signal 2. Admitting your claim is bogus to the judge is not a good strategy. I obviously objected and argued that this was not the case she brought, and the judge must dismiss. The judge said to the woman, I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Docus. What would you say in response to his submission? The woman then lost it on the judge. Signal 3. Called her a racist. That's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. Yelled and swore at her, and said her human rights were being violated. The judge was visibly peeved and ordered the woman's case dismissed. I could see the judge gritting her teeth, so I decided to swing for the fences. I asked for an additional order that the woman not be allowed to start any other action against my client without first getting permission of the court. Essentially, I asked for an order that is usually awarded against people who repeatedly and baselessly sued the same defendant. This was the first time the woman sued my client. The judge agreed that such an order would be appropriate and granted it on the spot. I don't think it helped that the woman was continuing to swear at me and the judge throughout this time. God, this is going to read like it belongs in our Thathapand. My dad saw the video, which was famous at his firm. Workers' comp claim for a back injury that seems suspicious, so they sick a pie on the guy after a while, which is fairly common. Pie comes back with a video of the guy batting softball batting practice, talking his back over and over, exactly what he says he can't do. Okay, whatever. People get caught all the time. The camera pans and who is shagging balls in the outfield? Opposing freaking counsel. So, yeah. Case dropped and the judge took it up with the bar. Sue. In my country, shagging means to have sexual relations with. Please clarify if opposing counsel was doing the deed with balls in a softball field. Thanks. I was trying a civil case in New Hampshire in front of a salt of the earth jury. In the back row were 4 women. I called a witness who was an assistant town clerk. She came in without a subpoena voluntarily while on maternity leave. She left her baby at home. She was a lovely, well-spoken and articulate woman who oozed credibility and likability. Her evidence was useful to us but shouldn't have been fatal to the other side's case. After my direct exam, the other lawyer decides to tear into her with largely irrelevant questions in the harshest, most rude way possible. After one question which reeked of his ashlery, the 4 ladies in the back row were rolling their eyes and looking at each other as if to say, you believe this crap. It was right then and there I knew we were winning that one. Hit and run. My client was the one who got hit. Defendant's defense was, it may have been my car, but I had reported it stolen and it wasn't me behind the wheel of the car. During my client's examination in chief, me, what were you doing at the time? Client, I was waiting for the pedestrian light to turn green so that I could cross the street on the zebra crossing. Me, and did you wait for the light to turn green before crossing? Client, yes. The light turned green, and I waited a few seconds before crossing the street. Right then and there, the defendant jumps up and roars across the courtroom, my light was green to go. That bloody fricking liar dashed across the street. Keeping this as vague as possible to not dox myself, but my security camera caught the plaintiff putting a human poop in my mailbox. I can say that having good cameras, including a Ring doorbell, is a godsend. You can have full assurance that, should anything happen on your property, you dang well have evidence to document it. A lot of my family are personal injury lawyers. Most of the time when people fake injuries they then post pictures on their social media disproving it. One that sticks out was someone claiming injury in a car crash, I think severe neck and or back pain, and then posted pictures skiing. Overall, if you say you can't do this, make sure no photographic proof of you doing then. They can and will subpoena social media places, so even having accounts set to private won't help. Sister worked on a case where the guy was suing for permanent disability while also starting a roofing company under his own name. They recorded video of him moving packs of shingles all day long, day after day. He posted photos of himself up on roofs on the company's Facebook page. When the other lawyer got a call on his cell phone while he was making his closing argument to the judge, he told the judge just a second and took the call. Not a lawyer, of course. But I lived in a house with a slumlord property manager. Everything looked okay when we moved in, but we noticed a leaking spot in the ceiling. They just came and painted over it multiple times. We learned after the fact that half the house didn't even get air conditioning and had no air circulation, with windows nailed shut. After a year, my daughter developed asthma, my son had chronic sinus infections, and my husband and I had headaches and were sick every month. We also began to have issues with bugs no matter what we tried. I sent the kids off to their dads and my husband and I pulled our crap apart. We found mold on everything. Nothing in a visible place because I cleaned a lot. But once we pulled back furniture and mattresses, it was everywhere. I took pictures and had excellent documentation of our landlords. Less than stellar attention. We broke our lease and moved out with their approval, versus having them put us in a hotel. We threw away so much crap, all of which was documented. They tried to hit me with a $3,000 bill saying we ripped doors out. Doors I had pictures of being full of mold inside. I had about 100 pictures and about 30 pages of documents. They tried to say we trashed the place. My lawyer sent theirs just a few images and email transcripts and I had my deposit back a week later. My lawyer said the only reason he took my case was because of all of the documentation I provided. Truck driver changed his story on the stand about how the accident happened from what he had always said previously. Next on the stand, the police officer who had responded to the scene gives this new version too. I asked him on cross when he heard this new version, and he said, in the hallway just before I came in, "Oh, I'm definitely winning this one." Not my case, but during my aunt's divorce custody case. Wasn't really one hearing per se but over multiple hearings. My aunt wanted full custody of the kids. She initially had custody, but uncle was allowed to see the kids every other weekend under supervision. Uncle was abusive, nasty even to the kids, even under supervision. Social services reported his behavior, and at hearings he was rude and arrogant to the judge, wouldn't listen and even walked out on a few occasions. Even his barrister thought he was a piece of crap. He made it obvious he didn't give a crap about the kids, and he and his mother declared on a few occasions that the kids were a result of incest between their mother and her father. Yeah, he dug his own grave with that one. Judge ruled that normally father will get some custody at least, but he was making an exception and banning him from coming near the kids until they're 18. Aunt got full custody. My brother had a case where someone accidentally told the truth after years of lying. Realized they screwed up and asked the court reporter to strike it from the record. That is not how it works. Not a lawyer, but one time I had to get a restraining order against my ex-girlfriend. She was stalking me after I broke up with her. In retaliation, after I filed for the restraining order against her, she filed for one against me. Totally ridiculous, since all I wanted was for her to leave me alone. So we had a hearing in court to sort this out, and this conversation takes place. Judge, Mr. Lingonberry, it says in her statement that you attacked her with an axe. Did you attack this woman with an axe? Me. No, Your Honor. Judge, I see. Well, since you've both filed restraining orders against each other, why don't we forego the restraining orders and you two can just leave each other alone? My ex. Immediately. Yes. Me. Your Honor. I would still like the restraining order. Please. I got the restraining order. She violated it so many times I might as well not have, but I got the restraining order. While watching officer video of police basically attempting to trick this guy off his property for 2 hours to make an arrest, they finally do so, and charge client with evading arrest. However, while the police are standing around talking, the senior officer makes a hand motion and all mics go dead and they are still talking, but one officer walks up, and not having gotten the memo to cut off his mic, Sarge says, "So what did the DA say?" To which Mick responds, "A. He doesn't like the evading charge," he said. "What's the defense counsel going to say or a jury if they see our videos?" But he said I sent that to the DA and got an email back saying the charge was being dropped. When the judge called all counsel back into chambers during trial and told the opposing attorney, "The jury hates you, really, really hates you." I'm an appellate criminal defense attorney, which means I take the case after the defendant has been convicted, sentenced, and I try to convince a court of appeals that he deserves to be released from prison, get a new trial, get a new sentence. I had one case a few weeks ago that was a total travesty of justice. Black client tried by an all-white jury, not even a single minority in the entire venire, defended incompetently by a crap trial attorney who did absolutely nothing for him, who then got convicted on all counts and received an extremely high sentence for a relatively piddling fraud, higher than Manafort got. I raised 5 different issues on appeal, which is a lot. Typically I keep it to 1 issue or maybe 2. At oral argument, the judges on the panel seemed pretty sympathetic during my presentation, though they asked me some tough questions. After I sat down, the government lawyer went up to speak. Before she got a word out, the first thing the judge said was, "This is like a law school exam. There are so many issues here." Had a pretty good feeling I'd win after that one, and indeed they ended up reversing all of his convictions and my client is now a free man. When I said, I moved to have this photograph admitted into evidence, and the respondent witness I was questioning blurted out, "Yeah, I bet you do." Worked as a prosecutor and was handling an involuntary commitment hearing. This is a hearing when someone is mentally ill and another, usually a family member, has filed a petition with the court asking for the mentally ill person to be committed for medical treatment when they are a danger to themselves or others. The judge would always make everyone wait for at least 15 minutes before he entered the courtroom. The judge spent at least 5 of those minutes adjusting his toupee. The lady, the one being committed, was wearing only a blanket as she refused to wear clothing. During the 15-minute wait, she was screaming at me, calling me every racial insult she could. The judge walks in and suddenly her attention turns to the judge's toupee. She starts laughing and insulting him, asking why he had roadkill on his head. After 5 minutes of ranting, her attorney turns to me. We are sitting next to each other, not more than 2 feet apart, and asks me to move to have her removed. I said no. She was proving my case for me. After a couple more seconds I had a change of heart. I felt bad and made a motion to have the lady removed. The judge warned her that if she would not be quiet, she would be removed. She kept going on and on. She was taken back to the detention facility by the sheriff's deputy. The lady's husband then testified as to why she was a danger to herself. I don't remember the specifics. There was also a doctor's report submitted, in case anyone asks. This was 20+ years ago. She was sent to the state mental hospital for 14 days. I do not remember the exact time, but it is a temporary order and there has to be a review in a short time to see if the commitment should be longer or if the person should be released. She came back to court after having been medicated and she was a really sweet older lady. She had severe mental problems that required her meds to be adjusted. She was fine. smiling, and in a really good mood when she came back to court. Her husband was really happy to see her again and was relieved she was back to her normal state of health. Not a lawyer. I represented myself in a restraining order hearing, and I was terrified. I was the petitioner and I was in the same room as my abuser for the first time since I'd obtained the emergency order. I felt a lot better as soon as my abuser's lawyer butchered my name, and even better when the judge kept telling him off. Best moment, though, was when he declined to cross-examine my third witness because my other two had destroyed the points he was trying to make. Not a lawyer, just one of the folks gathering documents. The company got an unexpected demand letter claiming we provided a defective piece of equipment and wanting big bucks for the cost of repair and all the downtime it caused. Our in-house lawyer immediately thought something was up. Letters like that are never out of the blue, they're always preceded by phone calls and emails, and he always got looped in on those. So when he called me up to have the document preservation chat, he also wanted me to pull and print all emails ASAP. There weren't many, maybe 30 mentioning the company, 22 were from the company, and all of them, save 3, were from when they bought the machine over a year before. The last email was the only one I actually printed, and I decided to deliver it myself with one line highlighted, machine was surprisingly intact for being hit by a motorcycle going that fast. I had never seen our company lawyer smile, nor laugh, but he was doing both as soon as he read it. Responding to an appeal, counsel on the other side made submissions for the better part of an entire day. They finish. I'm up. I've spent a couple days reading the cases everyone is referring to, preparing the argument, cross-referencing the trial. I'm itching to be heard. The senior judge of 3 says, "We don't need to hear from you, Mr. Blogs." We get out of court as the client is freaking out wondering why I didn't get to say anything. I had to politely explain that means we won. The hardest bit was then justifying the time I spent and charges for preparing for the argument. It wasn't a hopeless appeal by a long shot. That was the real difficulty, although the costs order in our favor helped. Case is ongoing, but I feel pretty good about a recent deposition in which the plaintiff in a rear-end accident claim admitted to brake checking my defendant on an open road. I had a child custody case where our argument was that the father should only have supervised visitation until he gets his PTSD and related anger issues under control. Dad's attorney claims he does not have anger issues and that mom is a rimhead that is lying about everything. I pulled out an affidavit he had signed to submit to the disability office the year before that he was disabled due to anger issues such that the women in the office were afraid to work with him. He either had to admit to disability fraud or that he had an anger issue to the point that he could not work around people. In another, an unmarried couple bought a house together and then broke up. Woman wanted her value out of the house and obviously you cannot cut it in half. The remedy under law is to sell the house and split the proceeds. Problem is that ex lives there, so he obviously doesn't want that. The attorney for her ex argued that the court should give her a judgment for half the value of the property. I argued that, for one, that is not a remedy available under law, and 2, she already has an interest in the house under law by being an owner. She would only be reducing her interest by becoming a creditor. My state passed a child and car law that wasn't highly publicized. I have a client who left her baby that was sick with the flu in a locked vehicle in a child seat with the AC running while she ran into a pharmacy for, by the video, a minute and a half. A woman watched her get out of her car, tried the doors, then called the police. They got there as mom did. At trial, the officer testifies to everything that happened. State brings no other witnesses. I had read all the statements and realized something quickly. The officer testified as to the child being in the car and the mom wasn't there and how they got him out. Then said, the child was out of the car when I arrived on scene. Wait. Full stop. You just testified to all of this stuff about getting the child out. Nope. He was just reading from the other officer's report. Every bit of his testimony is struck. Directed verdict for acquittal. Similar, saw a prosecutor ask a defendant, who was charged with pot possession and calling the officer a pig, "Doesn't calling an officer a pig sound like something someone on pot would do?" To which the guy replied, "Sounds like the last thing a guy on pot would do." Found not guilty. When I was a wee little intern, I worked for the county prosecutor's office in a small town. On Wednesdays, I worked at the county court. We just handled traffic stuff, for the most part, but there were usually a few other crimes sprinkled in there. You know, drunk in public, minor possession, criminal mischief, and, always, domestic assault. This particular case should have been a slam dunk for the defense. The accused was facing counts of domestic assault and failure to comply with an officer. The first count was thrown out pretty quickly when it was shown that the girlfriend actually had zero evidence and a contradictory story. The second count probably would have been thrown out, too, because of the same issues. Then the defendant said the thing I'll never forget. "Can I just say something?" You could see the public defender crumble at that moment, because the defendant was an idiot. He proceeded to contradict everything he said before and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he had, in fact, failed to comply. Dumbass. OC calls my client as their first witness. OC walks to the podium and opens up a massive 3-ring binder and begins asking a question. The judge stops OC halfway through her first question to remind her that he already ruled on that issue, and there would be no questions about that topic. OC pauses for a solid 20 seconds like a deer in headlights, flips through the binder for what feels like forever, and then asks the judge for a 15-minute break, which the judge refuses to give. After that she closed the binder and sat down without asking the witness a single question. Bonus from the same case. The next day the defense shifted to arguing my client was too rich to deserve to win. They showed up with a massive poster-sized picture of a helicopter and asked my client if it was his helicopter. He said no. My client owned a helicopter, but for whatever reason they decided to print out a massive poster of a helicopter without making sure that it was the same one as my client's. They then asked the colossally stupid follow-up question, "What make you say this is not a picture of your helicopter?" To which my client got to gleefully reply, to the jury's immense amusement, "The words on the tail are written in German." Obligatory not a lawyer. My best friend had a custody hearing 2 weeks ago to try and gain full custody of his son. Ex didn't even show up because she couldn't even bother to get the date right. Needless to say, things went his way. Woo for stability for kids. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.